He stepped into the ring not just with gloves, but with style. While his opponents trembled in fear, he strutted around in shiny suits, golden capes, and a look that said, "I've already won before I even fight." Before he was a legend, Muhammad Ali was a spectacle, not just in boxing, but in everything he did. He knew the fight began long before the first punch. It began in his eyes, his speech, and, most importantly, his clothes. When the world still dressed in grey, Ali appeared in bright colors, silk suits, shiny shoes, and fabrics that reflected his self-confidence. He didn't just want to win, he wanted to be remembered. And he knew that appearance was part of the psychological warfare. In an era when athletes were discreet and followed standards, Ali broke all the rules. He showed up at press conferences in suits that seemed to scream, "I'm the greatest." Every detail of his clothing was an extension of his personality, bold, provocative, magnetic. The media called him arrogant. He called it authenticity. Because, for Ali, the body fought in the ring, but the mind won before the first round. This passion for extravagant suits wasn't just vanity. It was strategy. It was art. It was power. He dressed to dominate, and he did. Backstage, tailors competed to create something worthy of the champion. In hotel hallways, fans waited just to see him step off the elevator. Even without gloves, Ali knew how to deliver a knockout with his gaze and the sheen of the fabric. But what few knew was that this passion had deep roots, a desire to be seen, respected, and to transform his image into a symbol of pride for an entire generation. Because while the world saw him as a fighter, he saw himself as a king. And kings don't dress in ordinary clothes. It was 1964, and the world still didn't know how to deal with a man like Cassius Clay, young, bold, defiant. He walked with a confidence that seemed to irritate even the most conservative. But what was truly shocking was the way he presented himself. While other fighters wore simple, understated suits, Clay appeared in a sparkling white suit, a thin tie, and a bright red pocket square, as if he were a movie star about to steal the show. His every step seemed choreographed, every look calculated. He didn't just walk into a room, he dominated it. In the hotel hallways, journalists stopped writing as he passed. The sound of silk fabric rustling through the air was almost as imposing as his sharp words. "Look at me," he said without needing to speak. And everyone stared. It was impossible not to. Cassius Clay was a spectacle of self-confidence. For him, his body was his temple and his suit his armor, a symbol that, even outside the ring, he fought for respect. The young man from Louisville, who had come from nothing, now wore suits worth hundreds of dollars, not for luxury, but as a message: "You'll respect me because I dress like a boss." This relationship with clothing ran deeper than it seemed. Growing up in the segregated American South, Clay learned early on that the world judged by appearance. As a child, he watched white men in suits, hats, and polished shoes parade with power, while black men were forced to bow their heads. Clothing, for him, was a shield, a way to defy racism, to look the system in the eye and say, "I am the king, and you're going to have to accept it." Each suit was a political statement, each bold color, a provocation, each detail, a struggle. When he became Muhammad Ali, this visual expression took on new meaning. Now he was not just the athlete, but the man who spoke to God before fighting, who preached equality and black pride. The suit was no longer just vanity, it became a flag. The wide lapels, the shiny fabrics, the bold combinations, everything had intention. He used fashion as a psychological weapon, as a way to impose his presence and transform every press conference into a spectacle. "I'm handsome, I'm the greatest, I'm invincible," he would say, with a smile that blended charm and provocation. And the audience believed him, even those who hated him. In one of the most memorable scenes, before facing Sonny Liston, Ali appeared in a white coat, a high collar, and shiny black leather shoes. When the crowd saw him, the roar was deafening. Some booed, others chanted his name, but he simply smiled and said, "Liston will fall, and when he falls, he'll see me looking beautiful." The wry laughter, the theatrical self-confidence, it was all part of the game. He understood the power of image. He knew that a champion needed to be more than a fighter. He needed to be a legend, and that's exactly what he built. Through his style of dress, Ali created an identity the world would never forget. His silhouette, tall, imposing, draped in vibrant colors, became a trademark. Each suit seemed to carry a story, sometimes of defiance, sometimes of celebration. In an interview in the 1970s, he revealed something few knew: "I dress how I feel. If I'm happy, the world will see. If I'm angry, the world will feel." It was a simple yet powerful confession. It showed that fashion, for him, wasn't a mask, it was a mirror. In those days, seeing a black man wear extravagant clothing was an act of rebellion, a velvet glove slap in the face of prejudice. Ali didn't just fight for titles, he fought for dignity, and he did it with style, elegance, and a presence that transformed every appearance into a performance. He didn't need to shout to be noticed. He just had to show up. And it was on this invisible stage that of fashion, image, and symbol that Muhammad Ali began to build the myth that would endure forever. Because even before the bell rang, he had already won, not through strength, but through form, not through punches, but through message. Every button, every color, every detail said the same thing: I am the greatest, and even my clothes know it. At the end of that year, when the press declared him excessive, he responded with a smile and a phrase that would become legendary: excess is what you call freedom when you have not yet conquered it. And with that, Muhammad Ali proved that style is also resistance. Fame came quickly. Muhammad Ali's victories in the ring made him a global idol, but outside of it, his brilliance bothered many. He was young, black, Muslim, and too bold for the standards of an America still gripped by racism and hypocrisy. And it was precisely during this period, between his sporting prime and political battles, that his passion for extravagant suits became even more intense, almost a war shield against hatred and injustice. Ali didn't dress to please, he dressed to resist. In times of racial hatred, wearing a sparkling white suit was almost a declaration of independence. If the world wants to see me small, I'll dress like a giant, he told his tailors, demanding colors that contrasted with the gray of prejudice: fiery reds, shimmering golds, imported fabrics, silk details, and lapels that seemed to glow in the spotlight. Each outfit told a story of silent struggle. It was his way of showing he wouldn't be erased, not even by the headlines trying to tear him down, when he refused to fight in the Vietnam War. The United States government tried to destroy his career. They stripped him of his title, confiscated his passport, and banned him from fighting. But even without a ring, Ali didn't lose his shine. He began appearing at public events in even more extravagant suits: lilac, emerald green, petrol blue. If each color were a cry for freedom, the press called him arrogant, eccentric, insolent. But he wouldn't back down. He knew that his image was his most powerful weapon. If the world couldn't hear his struggles, it would see his presence. In a 1967 interview, he was asked why he insisted on wearing such flashy clothes at such a delicate moment in his career. Ali responded with serenity and fire in his eyes: when a man loses everything, he can still choose how he presents himself to the world. I choose to be a king, not a victim. This phrase echoed across the country. It was more than fashion. It was revolution. His clothes became part of black cultural resistance. Young people in Chicago, Detroit, and New York began to imitate him, buying colorful suits, patterned shirts, and shiny shoes. Being different became a symbol of pride. Muhammad Ali had transformed the concept of elegance into a political act. There was one night in particular that stuck in the memory of those who knew him. He was invited to a charity event in New York, and everyone expected him to be discreet. After all, he was being hounded and harshly criticized by the media. But Ali showed up wearing a gold suit with a hand-embroidered black cape inspired by African kings. When he entered, the entire room fell silent. Some thought it provocative, others saw poetry. He walked slowly between the tables, greeting each person as if he were a monarch parading before his people. A reporter approached and asked, "Why that outfit, Ali?" He replied without hesitation, "Because a free man doesn't apologize for shining." This episode spread across the newspapers. Some ridiculed him, saying he had lost his mind. Others began to understand Ali wasn't just dressing up, he was defending himself. It was his way of asserting his dignity at a time when many wanted to see him kneel. The tailors who dressed him knew that working with him was a challenge. He demanded perfection. No loose stitching, no soulless fabric, he would say, examining every inch of his suit in the mirror. He loved to feel the weight of the fabric on his shoulders, the shine on the sleeve, the firmness of the collar. It was like wearing courage. And when the mirror reflected his image, he would smile as if to say, "You can take away my struggles, but not my reign." During these years of forced exile from boxing, Muhammad Ali used his clothing to transform suffering into spectacle and silence into speech. Where others saw a defeated man, he appeared majestic, elegant, and unbeatable. The cameras followed him not only for his words, but because he seemed to carry in every button, in every fold of fabric, the essence of resistance. And it was during this period, far from the ring and the applause, that he cemented something greater than any belt: the image of a man who never bowed. His clothes were more than styles, they were flags sewn with pride and pain. And the world began to understand that Muhammad Ali wasn't just the greatest fighter in history. He was the man who learned to fight with his body, his mind, and his suit. "You can try to silence me," he once said, "but as long as I'm well dressed, no one will forget me." And it was this attitude, this courage to transform even clothing into a message that made Ali transcend sport and become an eternal symbol of power and authenticity. If you also believe that style is more than appearance, it's identity, it's strength, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments if you had to face the world, what would your war suit be? And to help us continue uncovering these real stories and improving the quality of our content, consider purchasing our ebook. You'll find the direct link in the first link in the description. Your support makes all the difference. The 1970s brought redemption. Muhammad Ali finally returned to the ring, and with him, the spectacle. But what the public didn't realize was that the real duel began long before he touched his glove. It began in the mirror. Ali knew that each entrance was a historic moment, and so he planned everything with almost theatrical precision. The suit, the color, the shine, the fabric, nothing was by chance. He said that the body fought in the ring, but the soul fought in appearance. A champion doesn't just win, he presents himself as such. He repeated with conviction as he watched the tailor adjust the fit on the shoulder. The behind-the-scenes nature of his choices was a ritual. He spent hours choosing the right fabric, comparing shades of gold, checking how the light reflected under the camera flash. Sometimes he'd ask for the lights to be dimmed just to see how the suit reacted in the shadows. "The outfit needs to speak even when I'm silent," he'd say. It was his way of preparing his mind. While many boxers sought concentration in silence, Ali prepared with style. He'd put on his jacket, adjust the collar, and look in the mirror as if to say to himself, "You are not an ordinary man. You are the spectacle." Every entrance to the ring became a performance. The shiny capes, the shorts embroidered with his name in gold letters, the gleaming boots, it was all part of the ritual of power. He understood that the audience didn't just want to see a fight, they wanted to see a symbol, and Ali delivered this perfectly. When he walked to the ring, the spotlights followed him as if he were a Hollywood star. The crowd chanted his name, and he waved with a provocative smile. He was the king on his throne. His opponent was often already psychologically defeated before the first round. But behind all that brilliance lay something deeper, vulnerability few knew. Muhammad Ali used his clothes as an emotional shield. He knew the world watched him critically, waiting for any weakness. So he literally cloaked himself in confidence. "If I look good, no one will know I'm scared," he once confessed to a close friend before a big fight. This phrase summed up his philosophy: appearance as armor, elegance as a mask of strength. And this mask worked. Even on days when he felt exhausted and doubting himself, all he had to do was put on an impeccable suit for his self-confidence to return. It was like putting on courage. During an international tour in London, he stayed at a luxurious hotel and, upon descending to the lobby, caught everyone's attention. He wore a royal blue suit with silver pinstripes, Italian shoes, and a watch that reflected the glow of the overhead lights. A reporter approached him and asked, "Ali, why so much glamour?" He replied with magnetic serenity, "Because the world needs to see the reflection of what it believes is impossible." The phrase became headline news, but what the public didn't know was that that day, he had cried alone in his room before going downstairs. He was afraid he wouldn't be the same fighter anymore. The outfit was his way of keeping that fear hidden. In the dressing rooms before fights, there was a silent ritual. While the team prepared him, he asked that no one speak. He stood, looking at his reflection, adjusting his cuffs and collar. Sometimes he ran his hand over his suit as if trying to feel the strength that awaited him. "Today I'm not Cassius, I'm not Ali. I'm the reflection of what no one can bring down," he would murmur. For him, dressing well was also a spiritual act, the transition from man to legend. But what was most impressive was the way he used fashion to provoke. He knew the press was always ready to criticize him, and he turned it into a weapon. In an interview, a journalist accused him of being superficial, of caring too much about luxury. Ali replied, "You call me vain because you can't stand to see a black man comfortable with his own greatness." Silence. No reply. The answer became history. Even outside the ring, he maintained his character. At social events, he appeared in suits that bordered on the theatrical. Vibrant colors, bold textures, gold cufflinks, engraved with his name. It was as if to say, while you try to diminish me, I'll increase the shine. And that was the essence of Muhammad Ali, turning every criticism into fuel, every scornful look into motivation. The most curious thing was the effect he had on those around him. Young athletes began to imitate him, not only in his posture, but also in his style. Boxing, until then a sport of sweat and simplicity, began to carry something of glamour, of spectacle. There he had changed the way the world viewed fighters. He had introduced the concept of the showman, the man who fights with his body but wins with his presence. And even though age was taking its toll, and his reflexes were no longer what they once were, he continued to appear impeccable. He said that a champion doesn't lose his class even when his body begins to betray his mind. Even trembling, even tired, he dressed like a king. It was his way of saying that time could steal vigor, but never his legacy. Backstage at one of his last interviews, a reporter watched him carefully put on a black velvet suit and asked, "Why do you still insist on this, Ollie?" He smiled, looked in the mirror, and replied, "Because when your reflection is still beautiful, the world believes you're still invincible." And in that moment, it became clear, Muhammad Ali didn't wear flashy clothes just for style. He wore them because each piece was an extension of his soul, a mixture of fear, pride, strength, and hope. And as long as a camera was pointed at him, the flash would never fade. But the world was changing, and the price of being a legend, of maintaining one's brilliance, would begin to take its toll not just on the body, but on the soul. Because behind the impeccable man in the suit lay a warrior, fighting against something that not even the most expensive fabric could hide: time. The years began to take their toll, but Muhammad Ali refused to let time dim his shine. Even with his body scarred from fighting and his voice slowing, he still insisted on dressing like a king. Every appearance was carefully planned: tailored suit, gleaming shoes, polished watch. For him, elegance was the ultimate form of resistance. "As long as I can choose what I wear, I remain the master of my story," he said serenely. Diseases began to emerge, and Parkinson's tried to rob him of control over the gestures that once hypnotized crowds. But even that didn't stop him from remaining impeccable. At public events, he appeared in dark, understated suits, but with details that revealed his essence: a gold scarf, a shiny tie, a slight smile that hid the pain. His clothes became his final armor, the symbol that his dignity was still intact. At a charity dinner, already visibly weakened, Ali appeared wearing a white suit and a red flower in his pocket. When everyone rose to applaud him, he simply nodded slowly and said, "The body ages, but style is eternal." The entire room fell silent. That night, no one saw a sick man, they saw the reflection of the myth. In recent years, his clothes became simpler, but never ordinary. Each color carried meaning: black for days of reflection, white for those of faith, gold to remind him he was still the greatest. The brilliance now came from within, and what was once provocation became a legacy. Ali understood that time could take everything: titles, youth, voice, but never what he had built with his image. Because his style wasn't about clothes, it was about courage. It was about not letting the world define when the show ended, and even when the voice fell silent, the suit continued to speak for him, reminding the world that a true champion is not measured by how many times he wins, but by how he chooses to remain standing when everything tries to knock him down. In his final years, Muhammad Ali no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. His voice was weak, his body tired, but his gaze, that steady, proud gaze, was still there. He appeared in public rarely, always in an elegant suit, discreet but commanding. He was the same man who once challenged the world with extravagant words and clothes, now speaking silently, through simplicity. Each appearance was a farewell without warning. During a ceremony in his honor, Ali appeared in a gray suit and silver tie. He walked slowly, supported, but when he reached the stage, he raised his fist, a small gesture, but enough to draw tears from the crowd. That trembling movement carried the strength of a lifetime. The audience saw no weakness, but eternity. At home, he cherished the suits from throughout his career. He said each one represented a version of himself: the dreamy boy, the invincible champion, the rebel, the wise man. "My clothes tell my story better than any book," he once murmured. On the day of his final farewell, he was dressed in the same kind of suit he loved: black, simple, impeccable. There was no flash, no extravagance, just elegance and respect. And somehow, it was perfect. Because, even without saying a word, Muhammad Ali continued to shout to the world who he was: the man who fought to the end. Inside and outside the ring, Muhammad Ali proved that style is more than appearance. It's attitude, it's identity, it's the courage to show who you are, even when the world tries to erase it. He wore clothes like someone waving a flag, to be seen, remembered, and, above all, respected. In the end, each suit was more than fabric, it was a piece of the soul of a man who never bowed. And as long as there's someone wearing their own truth, Ollie's brilliance will live on.